I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about the sex trafficking epidemic. Deana Pollard Sachs, author of Jeffrey Epstein book, joins me in studio, and the coronavirus, truth or exploitation. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
I am America, one voice, united we stand.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
Hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. Today we're going to talk about the topic of sex trafficking. And I know this is a very tender topic and maybe one a lot of people kind of cringe at and think, you know, I know it's a bad thing and I don't really like it very much. But in the First Five today, I want to talk broadly about the problem within America. I'm not talking about human trafficking of people brought into America who work as slaves or slave-type labor, which is one problem. I'm talking about the sex trafficking of minor children. I want to tell you just a few quick stories just to give a flavor, and then about one girl in Houston and another woman who is standing up, and it's an amazing thing. But a few quick stories. So in the state of Ohio, there was a child sex trafficking sting in which more than 100 people were arrested. One sex trafficking sting where they had young girls who had been forcibly brought into under control of sex traffickers who were being sexually molested, and they had at the time of the arrest a lineup of people waiting to go inside this area, I think it was a trailer park, but waiting to go inside to engage in sexual activity with minor girls. The police described those who were arrested to include a church youth group leader. Another person was an ER doctor, an emergency room doctor. And I tell that story just to make the point that this is not something that only happens in lower income America or America where people are, drugged out. And this is an epidemic in our country. That story was one, rather breathtaking numbers. There also was a big sweep made last year and again this year just before the Super Bowl. Last year, outside of Atlanta, the police arrested, just in the investigation leading up to the Super Bowl, 169 people arrested in human trafficking, bringing, again, young minor girls to be forced into sexual involvement with adults of various kinds. Another story, Stanislaus County in California. Police in just one sting arrested 31 people. I raise these stories to say we could go through details and names, but the larger thing is this is becoming an epidemic in our country. And in part, the reason that it is so difficult to even picture is because to the average American, it is truly invisible. You just don't, I have my life, we have our happy home, we have, our kids happen to be grown, but we had a happy family. I mean, it just exists in some world that we can't picture. But the fact is, human trafficking, sex trafficking of young girls happens in our country. It is an epidemic. It involves adults who are otherwise seen to be stellar members of the community. Another story I didn't bring with me today, but it involved two pastors I think it was in Nebraska, who both had large churches, loyal wives and families, lovely churches, filled to the brims with people hearing lovely sermons on Sunday morning. And these two pastors were involved in sex trafficking, and in particular one girl, but passing her back and forth, who was afraid to tell her parents because she said, as she testified, my parents would never believe me, that it was our pastor. So this is a huge problem. We're going to be talking about this, though, in the context in just a moment with our guest in studio. Not the story we'll talk about in a moment involves Jeffrey Epstein. It involves girls who were not kidnapped forcibly and taken away from their lives, but really girls lured into, gradually in a step-by-step process, lured into becoming involved in sex trafficking. I want to hit two other quick stories. All these stories, by the way, if you want to read about them, you can go to my website, americacanwetalk.org. On the home page, under shows, drop down list of links. You can read these stories yourself. One involves a girl in Houston, a young girl in Houston, kidnapped outside of her public school, kidnapped by a group that got her involved in sex trafficking in providing sexual services by force to various men. And her story, it gives a little bit of a window on what happens emotionally to these kids. This girl was 13 at the time she was kidnapped. She got involved in this sexual exploitation by the person who grabbed her. And when the police finally arrested the guy, actually he got arrested, he got taken into custody, she was freed, she's given back to her parents. A few weeks later, she ran away from home because she wanted to go back to the sex trafficker. Because in her confused mind, she developed a bond with him, that he was kind of okay with her. And eventually they got her back again, and this young girl ended up taking her own life because she could not get emotionally grounded and stable again. Last story, on a positive note, before I turn to our guest, is this. There's another woman in America who was the victim of sex trafficking for a long time. And this is, if you go to our website and read this is a 13-page story, but you will love it because it's a woman who got caught up in this. She was forcibly grabbed, involved in sex trafficking for years, involved in being the victim. But she decided she was going to make a difference in life for other girls. She helps rescue girls. She helps explain to them what's happening to them. She helps police identify where these people are. And this is so it's really a very hopeful story about an otherwise simply horrific and ongoing problem that she's willing to say, you know what, not only am I going to get out of this myself and get my life back, I'm going to try to help others. Last point in the first 5. If you live in the Dallas, Texas area, there's a group called Deliver Fund. We've had one of their spokesmen on the show before, Jeremy Mayhew. These are people who are former NSA and other military spy types who are using their skills to track down the traffickers, using their high-tech military-trained skills to find these bad guys, figuring out how they're communicating, because much of what they're doing online, not in the kind of online you and I would go to, but the dark web, the deep web, and they're finding these people and bringing them to justice. If you're in the Dallas area, they have a fundraiser coming up, and I'm helping to sponsor that. So if you're interested, email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com, and I'll send you an invitation. And that, my friends, is today's first 5. As I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest joining us in studio, Deana Pollard Sachs. Before we get going, I'll just show you her book. This is her first book. It's called The Godfathers of Sex Abuse, Book 1, Jeffrey Epstein. Deana is a law professor. I have her 11-page CV resume in front of me, and I can't read the whole thing, but she is a prolific writer and speaker, and this is a book she did in writing this book. Dive in and read everything available humanly about Jeffrey Epstein's life, prosecution, what he engaged in, and where we ended up today wondering the famous question, did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? We will save till the end. So welcome, Deana.
Thank you, Debbie. Nice to be here.
So glad you're here. So let me just start with this. It is an epidemic, and it's just horrible, but part of what you wrote about, and I want to have you talk to people about, is girls who got sucked into this with Jeffrey Epstein and his crew. It wasn't the grab a stranger by force and drag. Can you tell me how Jeffrey Epstein and his team found the girls that he exploited?
There's a couple of ways. One of the ways was when it was a pyramid scheme, basically.
A pyramid scheme?
Yes, like a Ponzi scheme. The same thing he did with his finances, the same reason he was fired from Bear Stearns all those years ago. He's a con artist. What he would do is he would get girls, maybe 17-year-old girls, 16-year-old girls, to go and find 13-year-old girls. As you probably know, a 13-year-old girl will talk to a 17-year-old girl in the mall, but she wouldn't talk to a 50-year-old man. So he used these slightly older girls to go to the malls, to go to other areas in West Palm Beach, where the girls were making minimum wage, and he would have the slightly older girls tell the very young teens that if they wanted to make some money, $200 an hour. There's an old man in Palm Beach who will pay $200 an hour for a massage, and you don't have to
a massage,
and you don't have any training or anything. Now, what many of the girls said in the end when the police started investigating was that they all knew what that meant. And what a massage meant was getting down to your underwear and massaging him, and then allowing him to masturbate in front of them. But if you were willing to do more, they'd tell these little girls, you'll get more money. So if the girls were willing to let him touch them, and on a few occasions even intercourse, but not very often, he would use a vibrator on them and that sort of thing. So it was $200 off the bat just for getting down to your underwear and giving him a massage and then letting him do what he did to himself in front of you. Now, that was one aspect of his trafficking scheme. The other thing he would do is approach girls, outside of their high school, for example, in New York, and say, gosh, you'd be a great model, and I have an in Victoria's Secret. Would you like to be a model? And of course the girls would want to be a model. They all want to be a model. And so they would come and meet him, and he had different schemes depending on how much support the girls had. The girls who were, for example, one girl was at a private school, beautiful girl, and she was standing outside her school one day, I think waiting for her mom to pick her up, and I think it was Ghislaine Maxwell who found her. He had scouts all over the place.
Yeah, we're going to talk about her in a minute, but go ahead.
Anyway, and he started giving her money, saying, gosh, you're really talented. She was at a high school for the performing arts, and so he was supposedly wanted to help her to become a star. And the idea was, this really rich man likes to help people. He wants to help you. And she got dragged in that way. So it was kind of two ways they got dragged in. One through this massage, which is high dollar for these girls making, gosh, at that time, probably $6 or $7 an hour for minimum wage. Or it was, hey, you could be a model. Why don't you come and let me help you with your career? So those are the two ways he got girls in. And one of the housekeepers said, when these girls came to the door and she was told, they're here for a modeling audition, she said, those girls are never going to model. They were 5'2",
They didn't have the physique.
No. And many of them were, average looking girls. They're all cute at age 13, right? I mean, all girls are. But they didn't have that model physique, the model look. And yet he had them believing they could model somehow if they stuck with him.
Okay, so let's go back to the mall scene. I try to picture, you're right, about girls have probably been warned by their parents, if an older man tries to talk to you, say no and leave me alone, and maybe even yell if he alarms you in some way. But they got drawn in by, and you're telling me now that they got drawn in kind of knowing what that really meant, but $200 an hour, I know that sounds like a lot of money, but I would think they would have been more frightened. It's like they didn't know to be frightened of him. And
there were so many girls involved, and they would have little groups of girls too running around together. And some of the girls were pulled in by other girls in their same high school, so girls they knew. One girl described an older girl who was very popular, and she always wanted her to like her. And so when this popular girl approached her and said, "Hey, you want to, make some really good extra money for Christmas?" It was around Christmas time apparently, and she said, "Yeah, what do I have to do?" And she goes, "Not much. All you have to do is, the elder girls would say, this guy's really rich. $200 to him is nothing. So basically, you're just gonna go down to your underwear and massage
Give
him.
a massage.
Yeah, and that was. But they knew that they would have to go at least down to their underwear, to their panties, and sometimes he let them leave their bra on. But usually he liked to look at their bodies and kind of comment on their developing, breast buds and things like that. He was
so sick,
extremely sick. Yeah.
Okay, so is it accurate that I always picture girls like that who are receptive to that? They are come from maybe a little, not necessarily a well-off family.
Right.
Some of them are from foster homes where they're not quite getting the guidance.
Right.
So these are girls that don't really have the grounding.
Right.
I'll guess you probably had, I certainly had growing up, my kids had. They would have known something's wrong here.
Right.
But when you don't have that, it's like our society has a little bit of responsibility for the fact these girls are in foster homes and so vulnerable, and we're going to get around to what we can do about this, but so the girls are vulnerable, they're not being grabbed. So once they have this episode with him, say they go home with him, so what happens next? Are the girls then brought along by him into other?
Well, to be clear, the girls needed money. And he specifically targeted girls who were from the wrong side of the tracks, so to speak. Girls who were in foster care, girls who were living in trailer parks, girls who were homeless.
Low income.
Yes, and like Bill Cosby, he also specifically asked a modeling agency he worked with, who gave him something like 4 to 5 girls a week, to make sure and send him the newest ones who had no money, the ones who were struggling financially, because these men are not stupid. They know that women and girls who need money are more likely to play along because they need money. They need to eat. They need food. I mean, some of the girls were literally on the streets when Jeffrey Epstein found them. So, and they talked about that later, about how horrible that was for him to do that, knowing they needed money so badly.
Took advantage of them.
Oh, totally, yeah.
I'm sorry, we're not going to talk about Cosby much today, but he actually
Right.
told
Oh, yeah.
the modeling agency, send the ones, basically the poorer ones,
Right.
who are just going to be easier for me to manipulate.
Yep. Well, he didn't say the latter part about manipulating.
Right,
but
I'm saying that.
Right, absolutely. That's a good conclusion, yes. And what Jeffrey Epstein did, which was kind of weird to me, and one of the weirdest things he did, is he didn't often want a girl more than once. He wanted, one time with a girl, and then he would turn her into a scout. So he would say, basically, if every girl you bring me is $200. So that's like, well, that's even a faster $200. You could bring in 3 girls, $600, even faster than a massage. So he had these girls going out and bringing more and more in. There was just a constant influx. It's like there was never enough girls for him. He wanted to sort of deflower these girls, and he had this thing about it. Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about Ghislaine. Is I saying Ghislaine? Ghislaine Maxwell.
Or Ghislaine. I hear different ways, but Ghislaine.
Yeah. How, first of all, she was assisting him in many ways, covering for him, protecting him, almost giving him credibility. She'd be seen in public with him as maybe not as a couple, but as a supporter. So what was her story? Why would she be so willing to help a guy doing all this?
Well, she is a very troubled person. She was anorexic as a toddler. She had a death in the family very young. I think her brother died when she was literally like a week or 2 old or something. She was very close to her father, Robert Maxwell, who is a notorious, probably a triple agent. It's not entirely clear, but he clearly worked for various agencies, the Mossad and whatnot, is the reputation he has and what everyone says. He also stole like 400 million pounds from a company he bought out of the pension fund. The people never got their money. He then then he fell off his yacht near the Canary Islands, and he was found floating. And the story is he was probably thrown off the yacht. I mean, people were really mad about their pension fund being stolen. But she was devastated by the death of her father, and so she moved to New York to sort of start fresh, and that's where she met Jeffrey Epstein. But yes, because her father had so much money he stole, by the way, like Jeffrey Epstein, who stole everything he had. I mean, everything he had was, he's just a con artist from day one. Stole from his friends, cheated his own clients, that kind of thing, all every step of the way. But she just fell hard for Jeffrey Epstein, and people would talk about, how similar he was to her father, and that she was, head over heels in love. They dated for a while, and yes, I believe he used her to climb the social scene in New York because she had a bigger name than he did.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he was, for whatever reason, embraced by the New York socialite crowd, which it's so hard for me to understand how that can be. I mean, the guy looks creepy, to begin with, and he never had any credentials, never had a college degree. And yet was this, renowned millionaire, and no one knew how he made the money, which should always be a red flag. And people just didn't ask questions.
It is astonishing that, many avenues we can go on, but that point your book makes, and others have made this idea that he has so much money and no one ever knew how he made it. I mean, most people you can say, well, he developed this fabulous company, an energy company or a high-tech company. He just had money, and people, okay, but I want to go back to, so how our society let a guy like this continue to function. His conduct was well known. It wasn't like it was the biggest secret. So he was prosecuted once in Florida. Can you give a summary how he was prosecuted because a mom went in to the police to complain about her daughter having been lured in by him.
It was actually her stepdaughter, but she called the police in 2005 and said, my stepdaughter was approached and was asked to massage an older man for a lot of money, and she said something's wrong with this picture. So that's when the Palm Beach police got involved, and the Palm Beach police ultimately was the only group who consistently was clean in this. I mean, the U.S. Attorney's Office was dirty. The state prosecutor's office was
you're dirty meaning helping Epstein.
Helping Epstein, especially after Alan Dershowitz flew down to Palm Beach to talk to these folks. All of a sudden it went from, the police were really upset about it because it went from the state prosecutor saying we're going to get get this guy to saying, the girls aren't that credible, and really turn an about face. And the chief of police was pretty upset about it. And
so Dershowitz conversation with the state prosecutor.
Well, first he tried with the police and tried telling Joseph Ricari, the lead investigator, and Michael Ryder, that the chief of police, that these girls are not credible. And Alan Dershowitz was digging through their Facebook and whatever, all the different social media platforms they have, and found things such as one girl said that she liked marijuana. Oh boy!
So trying to discredit them.
Absolutely,
Yeah, okay.
Yes, discrediting the girls off the bat, and that didn't work with the police. And so he then went to Barry Krishner, who was the state attorney, and apparently made some headway there. And that's when the police chief in Palm Beach called the FBI and said, "You know what? This state prosecutor is not going to work.
Yeah.
He's already been apparently, convinced not to go after this guy." And so that's when the FBI came in, which of course, the U.S. Attorney's Office got involved, but. Looking at the correspondence between the U.S. attorneys and Jeffrey Epstein's fleet of lawyers, Ken Starr, Alan Dershowitz, Jay Lefkowitz, and a myriad of other very high-powered lawyers, they were all in on it, sort of in a sense. I mean, Alexander Acosta will now say that he did the best he could, but if you look at the emails, and I reprinted them all, the letters, emails from the court file, in one chapter of the book. No, they met way off, 70 miles from his office. He met, so no one would follow them. The Marie Villafania, who was the assistant to Alexander Acosta, and who was really doing a lot of the leg work for him, which I call the dirty work for him. She would send out emails saying things like, I don't like plaintiffs' lawyers anyway, never have. And it's like, these are
I don't like what
plaintiffs' lawyers.
Oh, okay.
And the plaintiffs are these girls, these minor girls.
Right,
Those
right.
are the plaintiffs.
Yeah.
So it just isn't inappropriate for a U.S. attorney to say that. We're paying her. She's on public payroll. She's supposed to help us.
Right.
And to say that, it sounds biased. And then she would say things like, I want to come incognito to the hearing. When's it going to be? And, I can file the charges or file, out of the area so the media won't know, what's going on. She was audacious enough to say that in emails.
What is the reason? I mean, we're going to get to the sentence he got, but what is the reason all of those people in power? I mean, my big issue with him, beside that I would still like to have some justice for the girls and all the other people who use them, but how does our society do this, that he pretty much skated most of his life with many people realizing what he was all about. People knew about Lolita Island. They knew about everything he was doing, the Lolita Express. So what is the reason, in your view, those prosecutors could be compromised just because someone comes up? Was it money paid to the prosecutors?
Not exactly. Alexander Acosta said at one point that he was told to stand down with Jeffrey Epstein because he was intelligence. And he was pressed on that issue much later, and he said, well,
Wait, because Epstein was intelligence,
yes.
Meaning working with our intelligence
Who knows?
Agencies.
And
Okay.
that's why I say in the book, like, what kind of intelligence?
Yeah.
CIA, FBI, are we talking about the Mossad? Back to the Mossad again? No one knows. And then Alexander Acosta backed down on those statements later when he was questioned about them again.
Yeah.
And then he said something like, you can't go down every rabbit hole. Like, what is that supposed to mean?
It is.
So we're not getting answers, but here's what I think. One of my friends had a father in Houston who was extremely politically connected. And she told me years ago that the way it works is you get dirt on everyone around you as a politician so that they can't do anything to you. And if you get caught, then you tell, okay, if they bring me down, I'm going to tell on you guys.
I know, you all these things, yeah.
I think what happened was somebody or some people high up in politics, very high up possibly, were with Jeffrey Epstein, he had knowledge of them, and it was the kind of thing where he had so much dirt on so many people, and he filmed them.
That was my next question.
He had his houses were like, a James Bond movie. They had cameras everywhere. When he brought the men out to his island, which is anyway, I would say the main stomping ground for his sex trafficking out there, he had everything on film, and these men didn't know it. So all the guest rooms were rigged with cameras, and he had all these films and photographs, and he would say, and Ghislaine Maxwell would say also, we've got insurance. They can't do anything to us. These are insurance policies, these photographs and these films.
Of course they are. If you are one of his many extremely powerful clients and you're engaging in intimacy with a minor and they've got you on film, you're never going to go after him.
And these are world leaders. These are not just...
Right, common Joe.
Not just, two of our presidents were implicated, okay? President Trump was implicated to some degree. That did not pan out very well. Bill Clinton was implicated much more so.
Oh, yeah.
But also didn't when all the documents were released, everyone expected to find things on, possibly Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. That didn't happen. And Donald Trump, by the way, some of the girls actually came and defended him and said he was not involved. But Bill Clinton is more of an open question. We don't know. He was on the plane a lot. We know that a number of times.
Yeah, he was on the plane. It was like 26 times. Yeah.
Well, but 26 trips, keep in mind, that could be, 3 or 4 round trips because every leg is considered.
So it's a trip? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in any case, he was on the plane.
Right,
but maybe,
absolutely,
okay.
yes.
I did read that the girls had said Trump was there, but he wasn't there with the women.
The girls said he didn't even talk or engage with them. He
didn't engage at all.
Seemed to want nothing to do with them. But what we do know about Trump is that he had a lot of girlfriends that were probably of age. I mean, lots and lots, and so did Jeffrey Epstein. And these two, supposedly, in the early, I guess, 2000s, were running around Palm Beach all the time and bringing dozens and dozens of 20-year-old girls home. So Jeffrey Epstein had, what David Boies ultimately said was, only half the girls he had sex with were underage. The other half were of age, and we're talking thousands of women probably. So he had a lot of women of different ages, but a lot of them were underage and really young. Some were as young as 12.
Yeah. Okay, I want to get, there's so much to talk about. I want to, on Florida, wrap it up. So you had a complaint. We just talked about all the state prosecutor, first interested, then not interested, police wanting, FBI got involved. Finally, there was prosecution and a settlement and a plea. So because I think this is astonishing, telling our listeners the sentence that Epstein got. He got sent to
it was a stockade. It was like an empty building. He had the entire building to himself.
This was where he got, instead of a jail cell.
It was not a prison.
Yeah.
It was not a jail, exactly. No, it was a stockade. And it wasn't that far from his home. He got 18 months, but never served that amount of time. He ended up serving 13. The lawyers immediately went for work release, which you're not supposed to get under those circumstances, but he did get work release. And he was off, up to 16 hours a day.
And with girls, again.
And now we're finding out he set up a little sham office not far from the stockade where he would go for lunch and whatnot, and he would have girls meet him there. And now one girl is sued saying that during the time he was in prison, so to speak, but not in a prison, he was continuing on with his, molesting of girls. Well, he's an addict. And this is one thing that the police said in Palm Beach is this guy cannot stop. He is completely addicted to little girls and can never get enough of them.
Okay, let's move forward to his brief period of time incarcerated in New York and what happened there. Because I do want to get to how do we solve this, the kind of, what do we do as a society? We can't just, we know it happens. We cannot make a perfect society, but what do we do to try fixing it? But up to New York now, he was prosecuted, or he's going to be prosecuted. He ended up being allegedly found deceased in his jail cell.
Right.
And there was, and all of you listeners, everyone knows that it became the funniest meme of all time for people to try to put in any place they possibly could. They would have a grocery list, and then Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, and then the next thing.
Right.
So you've read, though, every legal document, every court document, everything there is to read. What is your take on, first of all, did he kill himself?
I don't believe that for one moment, because when you study him the way I did, you know his personality. He does not have the kind of personality that would commit suicide. That's my opinion. I've known 2 people to commit suicide, one girl from my high school and one a young boy in Malibu who was only 20 years old. And he's a total narcissist, total con artist, sociopath. I don't think he had the personality for it, and nothing adds up on the suicide thing.
Yeah, run through those.
Well, for example, his lawyer said he wasn't depressed. He did not seem suicidal at all. His lawyers were telling him he was going to get off. Now, I disagree with that, but that if he thought he was going to get off and have the charges dismissed, then why would he commit suicide? The will he created, that was a pour over will. It went into a trust. This guy preserved his funds. They're saying, it shows he was going to commit suicide. He went and changed his will. Yeah, not really. What it showed was that he put his money into a place where no one could get it. And they say, that's for his brother. Well, he didn't do anything for anybody his whole life. Why would he suddenly, before he dies, decide to do something to make sure his brother he hardly talked to. And, what I thought about that was, he made sure and hid that money for at least a couple, 2-3 years, to minimum, to get to it with the kind of paperwork he did. That would give him time, too, to go set up house somewhere else and go tap into those funds, because they were all going to be drained by the litigation.
Yeah.
And he wanted to make sure those funds were available. So I have a suspicion he may not be dead at all. because nothing adds up. And when the media lost their bid at trying to convince us he committed suicide, they then went to the murder idea. But here's the deal. At the time of his death, supposedly, he was supposedly found hanging with cloth, a ligature somebody twisted into a cloth and made in his cell, and he was found hanging. Okay, and people talk about, wait a minute, it's really hard to hang yourself with this really flimsy cloth. You'd have to lean forward, and you can get enough pressure to cut off your windpipe, but you couldn't break bones with that cloth ligature, right? So everyone's talking about that he had no materials in his room, nothing you could hang himself with. He would have had to lean forward on his cell, on and on and on. And Dr. Baden, who came in and talked about it, was talking about how, they should test the ligature for the DNA. Who twisted it? Who made the noose?
Yeah.
Now get this, just about a month ago, 60 Minutes has a whole story about Jeffrey Epstein. And now, suddenly, out of the blue, 5 months later, they're saying he had a sleep apnea machine in his cell with a long electrical cord, like any of the cords in here. And then they showed a picture of him with a very clean, like a cord, strangle mark. Okay, now none of that was reported at the time of his death.
Right.
No photos like that were ever, there was never even a sense that there was any machine, any electrical cord in his room.
But now the stories, he had a sleep apnea
5
machine.
months later, this story comes up, and I'm just not buying it. I'm like, wait, that is so critical to how he killed himself. And back at the time around his supposed death, no one mentioned that he had any tools to kill himself.
This is a new explanation.
It's ridiculous.
So they had the video camera that should have been running was somehow either turned off.
Numerous video cameras were not operating that night, apparently. I mean, they've given us no footage.
Yeah, no cameras that should have been running were running. And was it also the case that the guards who had the regular duty that were supposed to be, they would have been checking periodically, somehow mischecking or
well, there was
weren't
a
there?
substitute for one thing.
Yeah.
And they were literally 15 feet from his cell. And this guy supposedly committed suicide, and they were supposed to be watching him, at least every 30 minutes. They were right there. And, they're apparently saying they didn't hear anything or whatever. But, the fact that if indeed the body is his, and there were multiple breaks in his neck bones, including the hyoid, which is kind of up under, you kind of have to. That's why in strangulation it's so common. I go into details about this with the experts in my book about how we know that normally is strangulation. You can't hang yourself and get up under there because the noose wouldn't go in that direction. So there's that. There's just so many facts that didn't add up. And after the book was written, after it was published actually, is when 60 Minutes came out with that story, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. That is the kind of information we should have had right up front, that he was allowed to have a machine in his cell that he could use to hang himself. But that was never even brought up. So now they're trying to say, okay, well, someone strangled him with this cord. It's like, okay, you guys, when are you going to get the story straight?
Yeah. Well, I want to, first of all, if you tuned in slightly late, we're speaking with Deana Pollard. She is the author of this book, The Godfathers of Sex Abuse, Book 1, Jeffrey Epstein. She has with her another book she has now released. You want to quick show our listeners that one?
Oh, sure. This one is on Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, and the Me Too movement. And it was going to be one book, but it got so big it had to become two. And Jeffrey Epstein has his own book. There's just so much going on there. And like I said, even after the book was published, more came out.
Yeah.
So it's just been, and this, of course, I had to just revise the other day, and I'll have to revise tomorrow quickly to put in the sentence. He's going to be sentenced tomorrow. But this one goes into, how these three predators are very similar. Their MOs were incredibly similar. Each of these three had a prosecutor in their pocket. Jeffrey Epstein had Alexander Acosta in Marie Villafana. Harvey Weinstein had Cy Vance in New York, and Bill Cosby had Bruce Castor in Philadelphia. So they had people on their side helping these guys against the victims. And sometimes the prosecutors would actually go after the victims and try to discredit them. It was really pretty despicable. Yeah, the way they treated the women.
Yeah. I was so eager to jump into your book, I didn't do an adequate introduction. So Deana is a law professor. She is a law professor at Thurgood Marshall School of Law at Texas Southern University. She is a prolific writer, and on our website we have a link to her book. So if you'd like to buy her book, which I urge you to do, you can do it on Amazon and read for yourself, because I think the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, I urge you to do that. And then last and closing question on this, on Jeffrey Epstein, whether he's alive or dead, which I don't know. I certainly don't think he killed himself. Let's be clear about that. Either he's deceased by murder or he's gotten away somewhere. But as a society, and I know this is a big question probably for another interview sometime, but as a society, the girls, the victims that our society commits to protect through our legal system, really kind of got nothing out of our legal system to help them. They got no justice, no vindication. In fact, you're alluding to the fact the prosecutors in certain ways, almost tried to make them as somehow the bad guy or partially responsible. So is there, in fact, maybe this isn't fair at the end of an interview, but what is it we're going to do about that in the future? The next Jeffrey Epstein, are there things we can be doing as a country?
Well, I have that in the third part of my book, and I said, what do we do with this information? We know that the EEOC is hiding documents from people. We know that from Megan Twohey and Jody Cantor, who experienced that when they were investigating Weinstein. We know the prosecutors aren't working for us. We know that oftentimes our legislatures aren't working for us. So what I said is we need to privatize. We need to privatize the repository of information. I got the website, the Me Too Network, .com, and I haven't built it out yet, but my idea is that we bring everyone into one forum so we can pool resources to fight back. Attorneys can fight back together, share depositions, share information, share research, share information with the prosecutors who are decent. I mean, that's one of the things that went on in Palm Beach is the attorneys, Jack Scarola and Brad Edwards, actually shared the information with the police because they need the support. So if we could centralize these complaints about sexual assault, sexual harassment, and find out who the predators are. Because one of the things that people seem to think is it's random or it happens all the time randomly. It's not random. I believe that the same people commit acts of sexual harassment and assault over and over, and most men never do. And this Me Too movement's kind of become a women versus men thing, and that's an enormous mistake because women were involved with the traffickers, and women are predators as well. And at the same time, many men support the women's side of this in terms of the victim side. So it needs to become an us versus them movement, not a women versus men movement, in recognition that many men are on the right side of this issue. And also men are falsely accused too, and that's another thing. So what I say in the last section of my second book that's coming out very soon, this one, is that we need to privatize the system. We can't trust the government systems anymore. That's been made very clear. And get really good attorneys. I've already got a couple attorneys on board to take these cases, help us, and to pool resources to fight back, because the government has limited resources, and these girls don't, and their plaintiffs' lawyers don't. And so we have to even the scales somehow with getting the information consolidated through, a private network that we can trust, with people we can trust. So that's my idea, is to just take it out of take it out of the government system exclusively, and bring it into a system that is privatized, so we can be in control of the data and start seeing the same men over and over are being accused. So you can't get access to other EEOC complaints. It could be the same with dental boards, same with medical boards, same with attorneys. And I think this should all be privatized, because attorneys are doing bad things too. And you go to find out if they've had any complaints, they won't tell you.
They won't. Right. And doctors, the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah. It's not right.
You are one energetic, determined researcher and writer. Deana Pollard, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Very, very good, folks. Get this book, read it, be armed with facts. It'll really will change the way you think about the whole sex trafficking thing, and really the whole Jeffrey Epstein adventure, which we have not yet fully resolved in this country. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So one last topic I want to hit today, folks, and now I only have Matt the Wonderful is going to probably tell me that I have to stop talking pretty soon. But I want to hit the story on coronavirus. I've talked about it a couple times before today, and I want to just hit where we are on this coronavirus, because I think there is a massive determination from some quarters politically to push this as a let's create panic, let's make sure people are fearful, versus a responsible, orderly process in responding to the threat in a responsible manner. To start with, inside the CDC, which Center for Disease Control, you may not know this, but they have in place, long before the coronavirus was ever a thing anyone had heard of, they have an entire team dedicated to dealing with epidemics, pandemics, extremely contagious things. They've been long in place before anyone ever heard of President Trump or China or the coronavirus. So to start with, there was I want to get the right comments. There was a coronavirus. If you go to CDC's website, it is filled with information about how it is contracted, how it is spread, what to do. It is being researched. Of course, everyone's trying to work as fast as they can and deliver something like a vaccine, but the work is being done. It is not, there's too much cavalier and accusatory language in media trying to pretend as though no one's doing anything, everyone's ignoring the risk. This is not true. This is America. We have an extremely strong public health service. CDC has people on top of this issue working to find the systems we need to have in place to protect the American citizens. That is already happening. There is a tremendous determination. In fact, I urge you to go on our website again, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under shows, drop down, list of links. I linked to the page the CDC has about the coronavirus, full of information about numbers and about contagion and about who's vulnerable. The simple and short story is, unless you're over 80, have some pre-existing health condition, or very young and very vulnerable, you may even come across coronavirus. You may actually contract it, and it's going to feel like the flu, and then it's going to be gone. So it's an important thing to understand. Yes, we have vulnerable populations. Yes, we have to protect them. There have been in America, I think the number today is 26 deaths. Nobody wants any deaths. We want 0 deaths from anything in America. But this is not the panic-filled pandemic the left is trying to signal that America is suffering. Next thing I want to tell you, there were some really interesting stories. And again, these stories were out of, I think it was Denmark. So there was a journalist in Denmark who was down in northern Italy on some assignment, got home, wasn't feeling that great, went to get tested because northern Italy has a problem with coronavirus, went to get tested. Yes, he had coronavirus. He was sick for about a week, and then he self-quarantined. They say if you believe you've been exposed, self-quarantine for 14 days, 2 weeks. The coronavirus is gone, and he said, I've had colds that made me feel worse. I've had flu. This is a 46-year-old guy. And again, these stories are on our website. There was a whole collection, story after story after story. People contracted it. They were responsible. They self-quarantined. They took whatever medication, and they were fine, and it is gone. And I'm telling you all this because I think that we can have an overreaction in our country that makes us unfairly accusatory of our fabulous public health service in this country, of the CDC, that is really doing about everything that can be done. And we had, and early on in January, when President Trump heard about the problem in China, before there was any inkling of the seriousness of it, he decided to shut off the people coming to America from China until we could figure out how bad is this. And I'll tease our show on Thursday. On Thursday this week, I have a woman, Reggie Littlejohn, who is in China all the time. She runs a program trying to help orphans and women in China, and she's been there recently, and she is going to give you a very firsthand description of things really like in China, because if you want to complain about a government not taking care of its people, you ought to be directing your comments to Xi Jinping and China. If you understood how badly they are treating people, how badly they're treating the average citizen on the street who happens to have symptoms, that's who you should be complaining about, not the American government. So I will tell you that 2 other quick things on this, because I'm running out of time. One is our Health and Human Services Secretary, Alex Azar, said in a Monday speech, so that would be yesterday, nobody is trying to minimize the risks of the coronavirus. Of course we understand it's a very serious public health threat. Of course we understand that. So he's on top of this. But then we have, by way of contrast, and the willingness and determination to politicize it, we have comments from some top Democrats I'm going to take a shot at. One, Nancy Pelosi put out a statement yesterday. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer put out a statement saying, President Trump continues to manufacture needless chaos within his administration, and it is hampering the government's response to the coronavirus outbreak. Obviously, no reference to any facts upon which that stupid statement was made. No reference to, except Trump put out a tweet, which, this is my last commentary before I got to go to why it matters to you. Here's Trump's tweet. So last year, 37,000 Americans died from the common flu. It averages between 27,000 and 70,000 per year. Nothing is shut down. Life and the economy go on. At this moment in America, there are 546 confirmed cases of coronavirus and 22 deaths. It is up to 26 now. So he put that out, and that was the tweet that these lefties were complaining about, saying he shouldn't be calming people down. To my sense of things, what Pelosi and Schumer are doing is the same thing they've done since the moment Donald Trump was elected, which is find a reason to make people hate him. Try to remove him from office. This is why the Democrats went after Trump for the false Russia collusion hoax. This is why the Democrats went after him with the Mueller investigation, which led to nothing. This is why the Democrats went after him on the Ukraine and leading all the way to impeachment over what Joe Biden said on live television he had done. They tried to impeach Trump, and fortunately, the country was spared from having him removed when he hadn't done anything wrong. So here we have Pelosi and Schumer yet again taking advantage of a scary situation. No one likes the coronavirus. No one is diminishing its concern about it. No one is saying it's nothing. They're using it as a political bat to clobber Donald Trump with. This is what Schumer is doing, what Joe Biden did. I could read a Biden statement, but honestly, he's almost like impaired. I don't want to read anything more he says. He made an extremely obnoxious comment, no basis in reality. In fact, I do have to tell you this. The comments they made were so ridiculous that even the AP, not known for conservative sympathy, even the AP denounced both Biden's statement and Schumer's and Pelosi's statement as not based in fact. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. As I do at the close of every show, I want to talk to you about why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So to start with, we started with our sex trafficking epidemic, the numbers of young women and their traffickers, and the range of male patrons staggering. And a doctor, an emergency room doctor, and a pastor, just to point out again, who was in line in the sex trafficking thing, that these conditions exist in the year 2020 is evidence of societal decline, not progress. From the sexual revolution of the 60s to the militant LGBTQ agenda of today, the sexualization of everyone at every age is a moral virus. And I really actually do believe that it's part of our problem. America is paying a price for a prolonged unwillingness to speak up against the relentless rage of leftists trashing the teaching of traditional morality rooted in the scriptures. And even if you don't like the scriptures, traditional morality is mocked by the American left, and this does not help us. America can do better. America must do better. Speak up to restore American culture. And on the coronavirus, truth or exploitation, the Democrat media mob efforts to politicize the coronavirus are over the top, transparent, and disgusting. Trump did not cause or create the coronavirus. China did. Trump did not hide or suppress early reporting data from China. China did. Trump did not cause or create supply chain dependence on China. Globalists did. Trump did not allow dependence on China for medications. Previous presidents did. And by the way, I think changes are coming in that point. I think we talked about this. 80% of the medications in America or more are manufactured in China. This is not smart on our part. We got to bring our own manufacturing back to America on that point. Trump administration policies are seeking to reverse dependency on China for manufacturing of any kind, control the spread of the virus, and ameliorate economic impact on Americans. Trump is leading like a president should. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Please tune in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America, because America matters. I'll talk to you next time.
Like a crashing wave. Can you hear us now?
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear